Ryan Bowers, and I'm incredibly excited to moderate this important conversation on economy builders on business corridors with impact. We have the leaders of two incredible organizations with us today, Boston Ujima Project and Kensington Corridor Trust, both who are bringing investors and residents together to have decision-making power on their neighborhoods and their city outcomes. I want to start with a brief conversation with our guest, and we've got a very exciting skit planned, and we'll follow up with some Q&A before we wrap. But I'd like to start by just introducing our two guests today. We have Adriana Abizadeh is currently the executive director of the Kensington Corridor Trust in Philadelphia. The mission, duty, and purpose of KCT is to help the Kensington community reclaim control over a once thriving commercial corridor by activating real estate, fostering local entrepreneurship, and reinvesting capital in the neighborhood. With deep interest in public policy, Adriana has taken every opportunity to utilize her privileged position as a nonprofit leader in order to speak out for what she believes in and to lift up the voices of impacted community members. Immersed in policy initiatives, she has facilitated community collaboration to address the intersectionality between immigration status, housing, poverty, and race. Adriana has a BA from Rutgers in political science with a minor in security, intelligence, and counterterrorism. She also has an MS in public policy from Drexel University. She's committed herself to serve on several boards and that reflects some of her deepest passions: immigration, racial and health equity, and youth development. When Adriana isn't serving her community, she's at home with her two children and two dogs. We also have Nia Evans, who is executive director of the Boston Ujima Project, which is focused on organizing greater Boston area neighborhoods, workers, business owners, and investors to create a community-controlled economy. Nia is a co-creator of Frame's Debate Project, a multimedia policy debate program that explores the intersection between drug policy, mental health services, and incarceration in Massachusetts. Nia has a bachelor's degree in industrial and labor relations from Cornell and a master's in education leadership with a course of study in leadership, policy, and politics from Teachers College at Columbia University. Nia has also studied at the University of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia, where she focused on international labor relations. Thank you both. And I'd love to just kick off with the first question. If you could describe the need for the work that you're doing and how your organization is responding to and meeting that need.
I will kick us off. So the Kensington Corridor Trust was formed back in 2019 in direct response to gentrification pressures that were coming into and encroaching on the Kensington neighborhood from some of the surrounding neighborhoods. And the model, the neighborhood trust model, is very intentionally built as a anti-displacement model, and it's really targeting long-term affordability for the folks who have lived in the neighborhood historically, so what we would call our legacy residents, and the business owners, so those legacy business owners as well. And the focus of the trust is really twofold. One is to preserve that local ownership through collective ownership and stewardship of the assets versus individual ownership of those assets. And then the second part is that affordability with a deep focus on the intergenerational affordability of those assets, right? So really ensuring that the folks who live in Kensington today can continue to live in Kensington tomorrow, 10 years from now, and furthermore. And so really excited to dig in a little deeper during the remainder of our conversation.
Thank you. And Ujima formed out of a study group that was started in 2014 to study what it would take to start a public bank. And this arose from what was happening in the background at that time was and still happening, gentrification and displacement, great inequality, a huge racial wealth gap in Boston. And really looking at small businesses and the inability of BIPOC-owned small businesses to access traditional capital, as well as the inability of our grassroots organizations to be able to access sustainable financing. And so we were essentially interested in, I would say, how we could take charge of our own fates and not necessarily be at the whims of institutional funders or traditional financiers to meet our needs in our communities.
Thank you both. Can you explain how the neighborhood trust model works and how that might be different from what traditional investors are used to. And Adriana, do you want to kick us off?
Absolutely. So the neighborhood trust model, I will try to keep us at a high level without going too granular. We are a 501c3, so a traditional nonprofit charitable entity, can accept donations, that is focused on systems change. And we are a perpetual purpose trust, which is a very specific type of trust structure that is built solely for the purpose of perpetually protecting the purpose. And so our purpose, as I noted previously, is to ensure long-term affordability and localized collective ownership of physical assets, which for us have been primarily commercial mixed use, but also some vacant lots. And we, in developing this model, took a very close look at other models that already existed and tried to identify some of the gaps. One of those largest gaps, and one of the things that is most unique about the trust, is our governance. So we are fully governed by residents and small business owners. There are two governing bodies, one for the Perpetual Purpose Trust and one for the 501c3. Those governing bodies are lateral to each other, so it is a hybrid construct. One does not supersede the other. Each have distinct roles. On the 501c3, those folks are very focused on the operational side of the work, right? So what does it look like to do the acquisitions? How do we move things into the development pipeline? What types of businesses are we attracting to the corridor? And how is all of that adding value collectively to the neighborhood? The Perpetual Purpose Trust, that governing body, is really focused on ensuring the long-term affordability of the assets and ensuring that the assets are being redeveloped in a way that is providing that long-term value. So it's a check on the C3 without direct supersedence in any way, shape, or form. So that's the legal model and infrastructure of the trust: two governing bodies, two legal entities, legally intertwined. And we do have the C3 for the purpose of subsidy and the ability to attract capital. And we have the Perpetual Purpose Trust for the purpose of protecting the assets intergenerationally.
Thank you so much. Nia, do you have anything to add to that?
No.
Great. One last question. KCT is now a trans local member of Boston Ujima Project. What does that mean and why is it important?
Sure. So we started the Translocal Membership Program in response to numerous inquiries that we received from different individuals, different communities around the U.S. And we really wanted to be responsive to those communities where it seemed like they were driven by a certain kind of urgency and really arising from a need that they saw within their communities and really wanting to get something off the ground like Ujima. And so we created the membership program to be in close relationship with those communities and to essentially be helpful in essentially getting to the next step. So either actually getting off the ground or just getting further. For us, it's also a way of vouching for other initiatives that are happening in other places that we think are doing great work, like Kensington Corridor Trust. So, for example, the Ujima Fund is currently closed for investment. We will have people who will ask, what other opportunities are available. So it's also our way to signal that there's great work happening in other places that we vouch for. And then finally, we believe in what we're doing. So we think that this is a great way of being when we talk about democratic governance, such as Adriana has talked about, when we talk about very explicitly centering working class communities, very explicitly centering BIPOC communities, thinking about wealth generation. We think that this would be a good way to be all over the US, not just in Boston. So we're not content with Boston kind of being a model in one place that people can be really excited about and point to. We do think that it's important for us to be able to see similar types of work in other places, and for us to actually regard this work and this way of being as normal. So that's also the idea behind the Translocal member.
And if I may just jump in and echo, I think that it's also important to note that we're building ecosystems, right? So oftentimes we can feel so alone in this work where one model in one city with even for Kensington Corridor Trust specifically, we are deeply place-based, right? We are talking about Kensington Avenue, 627 assets. That is the depth of our work. That is the scope of our work. That is where we will have impact. And so for us, it gives us the ability to really take our learnings to a national level, in partnership with folks who we deeply respect and admire, and who we think are just so in alignment with our own work and our own principles and values, from the way that we do our work to the way that it's executed to the way that it shows up in its impact.
Thank you so much. Next up, we're going to go through our skit that actually models some of what this process looks like.
So each one of you who are joining me in the skit, you are community stakeholders. So let's start with stakeholder number one. I believe that's Adriana. Adriana, what stakeholder group are you?
Today, I have the pleasure of being a university endowment.
Excellent. And as a university endowment, how much savings or investment capital do you have?
At my disposal, I have $7 billion.
All right, that's a nice amount. Is that money, where's that money being kept now? Is it Wall Street or Main Street?
Of course, it's on Wall Street.
And what would you say are the current risks and returns?
Yeah, so I would say we have a large endowment, clearly, and we've been a little risky. So about 75% of our assets are in risky securities that are really looking at long-term, long horizons. And we reserve 25% for less risky investments. And our returns, they've been pretty good over the last few years. We've been between 6 and 8%.
Okay, all right, excellent. That's good to know. So you've got a nice, healthy endowment, and you're willing to engage in some risk. So how much are you willing to invest in the Solidarity Fund today?
Today, we are willing to make a $1 million investment.
Oh, okay, all right. And if you could just write down that investment on a sheet of paper, Adriana, and hold that up for us, that'll be great. And now I'm going to go to stakeholder number two. So Ryan, you are in stakeholder number two. What stakeholder group are you?
I represent a local community foundation, the Bowers Community Foundation.
Okay, the Bowers Community Foundation. How much savings or investment capital do you have?
We have a $600 million endowment.
Okay, also a nice amount. Where's that money being kept now? Is it Wall Street or Main Street?
It's it's largely Wall Street. We're mainly invested in public markets, and we have actually a lot of exposure to private equity as well to juice our returns.
Okay, all right. This is so far it's sounding promising. What are the current risk and returns?
The risk is what I've recently heard from our grants team is that there's a actual major disconnect between our grant making aims and the investments that we're invested into. A lot of the fund managers are actually engaging in some practices that are undermining our grants. So that's a significant, it may not be a financial risk, but it's a tremendous mission risk. And then on the return side, I mean, we had 16% last year, and so we're pretty excited to hopefully continue that into 2023.
Okay, so I'm hearing you're working to kind of have the grants and the investment sides maybe match and impact a little more. So understanding that, how much are you willing to invest in the Solidarity Fund today?
We're going for 10 million. I think
10 million. Okay, all right. We like the Bowers Foundation. And let's go to our last stakeholder group. Stakeholder group number 3 is Geo. Geo, what stakeholder group are you?
Today, I am a business owner, and I hope to keep that consistent well into the next few years.
Okay, excellent. We do too. So, Gio, as a business owner, how much savings or investment capital do you have?
I'm looking at 60,000.
60,000. Okay, all right. So a bit modest, but that's okay. Where hard earned, exactly. Where is that money being kept now? Is it Wall Street or Main Street?
Main Street, local bank. I won't say which vault it is.
Okay, all right. And what are the current risks and returns?
Right now, we're still mapping that out. We have a very small team. However, I would say that the risk is making sure that my workers consistently have healthcare, and the return is making sure that they are adequately cared for.
Excellent. Thank you. So understanding that, a business owner, how much capital are you willing to invest in the Solidarity Fund today?
Whew, Christmas and all the holidays just passed, so I'm feeling very generous. I'm gonna go ahead and illustrate a contribution of, oof, of blank. There you go, blank. All right, that's supposed to say 20,000, but I've got some Zoom effect going on.
Okay, excellent. So 20,000. All right, excellent. Thank you so much, business owner. That's actually rather generous. And we can't see it because of the filter. So now I'm gonna ask every stakeholder group to hold up their sheet of paper to illustrate our capital stack. So together it looks like we have raised $11,020,000. And this is why these are some of the key benefits of a community-based capital stack. So it allows some people with less income, so low income families and workers can leverage our personal capital to gain access to larger forms of capital. So this is what we've done here. Philanthropic dollars can act as first loss reserves to protect more vulnerable investor classes from sustaining losses. And you also heard from Ryan here, can work to have the grant side and the investment side of foundations be more in tune with each other. And then finally, we see it allows for a range of investor types to build larger and larger capital pools. So with this community-based capital pool, we were able to include a business owner today. With the Ujima Fund, we have regular individuals participating in the fund. We have nonprofits, we have local faith institutions, we have all sorts of different stakeholders participating in the fund. So thank you. Scene.
Amazing. Thank you so much, our esteemed team of actors and facilitators. We're about to turn to our audience Q&A portion, but before I do that, I'd love to just ask Adriana and Nia one last question. In terms of your wish list, and you think about the audience, before you right now, what are some of your asks, financial, social, and otherwise, that this community and the broader investor community could be a resource to you for at this point in your organization's growth?
You first, Adriana.
Happy to kick us off. Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things. One, obviously, capital investments are necessary and required, and we need to continue to bring those in. I think the type of capital that the Kensington Corridor Trust is able to take, because we are perpetually holding, is different from traditional investments, right? So we're looking at lower interest, we're looking at longer terms, we're looking at deferred interest only periods or interest only periods, so that we can have the runway required to do the acquisition, redevelop the asset, and bring it online and have it generating revenue before we are in repayment. That's what allows the model to be sustainable. That's what allows us to hold assets intergenerationally. So that aside, we also love subsidy, right? So it makes it a lot easier to do our work when we don't have to repay funds that we've either put into direct assets, or we've put into engagement, or into our operations of our small team. We're a staff of 3, so we're quite nimble, and we're moving around and doing a lot of this work with volunteers from the neighborhood. And so we try to give stipends to our residents who are engaged in our work and a part of our governing body. But then technical assistance is also critical. So we do not have all of the expertise. We do not pretend to have all of the expertise. I will be the first person to get in front of the room and say, nope, that's not the thing that I know how to do. And let's go find the person. And so we've been very fortunate in the funder mix that we've had up until this point, that folks have been willing to invest in technical assistance support for us, right? So if that's legal counsel who have expertise in perpetual purpose trusts, if that's a real estate and finance coach that has expertise in putting together capital stacks, it really runs a wide array of things. And I think that some of those things we've kind of run through, and we won't need those supports long term, right? Like, I don't need a perpetual purpose trust attorney for the next 10 years. We needed them to figure out the legal inner workings, make sure we were going to be IRS A-OK, and get us launched. But there will be some needs long-term that we will have on the technical assistance front, both in terms of garnering expertise and growing our own base of knowledge, but also sheer capacity, right? We are a team of 3. And so the more folks that we can have come alongside us to support us in our work, the more efficient and effective we will be. So yeah, so I think it's, the direct investments into the trust to be able to do the work. I think it's the subsidy that comes alongside that to blend that capital out. And then I think it's the technical assistance that we're going to need long-term to continue to execute this work effectively.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I wanted Adriana to go first because I wanted to be able to just follow up and double down on your ask, essentially. So I would just say we want to do the best we can in our part in supporting KCT. The Ujima, so I should say the Ujima Fund is currently closed for investment. And so we want to encourage our current investors and potential investors to consider Kensington Corridor Trust. So if you're on the call, if you're in Boston today, you're looking for an opportunity to invest. We would like you to check KCT out. And we could maybe kind of talk about scheduling some type of conversation with our members to learn more. So just want to double down on that, supporting KCT via investments and via subsidy. The second piece of this with regards to Ujima directly, I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Gio just really quickly so he can answer on behalf of Ujima.
Thank you. In terms of Ujima, I would just make sure that you give us a follow. Social media engagement is like really big for us because that's how we get out our updates to our members, in addition to your more typical newsletters, things that arrive in the mail, and even the phone calls that myself and my peers have been doing. So the ask is to continue to simply talk about it, revolve it around your networks. Even LinkedIn is a really easy way to just quickly, find us on LinkedIn, Boston Ujima Project, to just quickly connect with us and be able to share and recycle our resources, our announcements, and other things that pertain to just pretty much Ujima values and such. Yeah, I don't know if you noticed, but our LinkedIn also has like news and announcements that are really important to us. So keeping up with our translocal partnerships, that's how Kensington comes into the picture. Understanding what our neighborhood and citywide assembly means to residents will also be a lesson that can be sent into other cities and communities that still want to create more worker power, that want to create more unions and people bringing their skills to a table and really trying to make their community work for them. It's not enough to just live somewhere and pay bills. We also want to shape our future together. And that really is what collective work and responsibility will continue to be historically and into our future. So thank you.
Thank you, Gio. Thank you, Nia, and thank you, Adriana. We're going to move into the Q&A portion of our discussion now. And I'll start with our first question from Mike Kozak. Are you seeing a difference between the return expectations between types of investors?
I guess I can start answering. So that's a good question, Mike. In short, no. But what I'll say is we did a lot of, before setting up the fund, we did a lot of pre-work with conducting focus groups, I guess you could call it, with different types of investors. So when I say part of the, what's unique about the fund is the way it's designed, is if you look at, we do have on our site, a little bit about the fund design. So if you look at how we've organized the different pools in the design, we actually have a pool called the Kujichagulia pool, which is very accessible. The minimum investment is $50. And the aims for returns for that pool is 3%. And then the next pool is Umoja, where the minimum investment is $1,000 and then the aims for returns is 2%. So you'll notice that that's not conventional. Usually what's conventional is the more you put in, the more you'll get back. And we've actually very intentionally flipped that. So that's our way of being redistributive and really trying to, return wealth, so to speak, to working class communities. And I mentioned that just to say, we made sure we talked with impact investors, we made sure we talked with philanthropic foundations to ask what they thought about that. So for example, the Nia pool, which is aimed for foundations, the aim return for that is between 1% and 1.5%. And we asked us, how much does this matter to you? And we found that for most of our investors, that didn't matter so much. I think I can recall maybe one person who said, yeah, actually do care. I actually do care about that kind of 1% difference. But for most of them, there were not different expectations. They understood what it was or what it is that we are trying to do.
Thank you so much.
Do you want me to answer, Ryan? Is that cool? Yes, real quick. So I would say a similar experience. I don't think we've had folks across different stakeholder groups with expectations of different interest rates, but much like Nia, I think it's because we've been very intentional about what we can accept. And so if folks are coming to have the conversation with the Kensington Corridor Trust, if it's a starter conversation, we're very transparent about the type of debt that we're taking on and how we're structuring those terms. And then if you're coming back for a second conversation, it's because you are at least willing to continue the conversation within those terms. So we haven't really seen a difference. And so whether our folks are individual investors or their foundations, all of our debt has been structured between 0 and 2%. There's an acknowledgement that we're not going beyond the 2% at this time.
Thank you. Adriana, can you speak about your relationship with the city and the use of kind of vacant or viable space for neighborhood impact?
Absolutely. So I would say we have had an interesting relationship with the city. We kind of don't fall into any of their bureaucratic buckets as they've existed historically. So we are not a private developer. We are not a community development corporation. We are this totally new thing. We're this neighborhood trust. And so I think the conversations have been positive in that folks at the city across different departments, commerce and others, find the model to be innovative. They acknowledge that it is working towards systems change. I think there is, and as there has been generally, concern around sustainability. What does it look like 10 years from now? What does it look like 20 years from now? What does the next generation out look like? And those are all reasonable fears or reasonable ways of evaluating the risk that KCT is taking on. And so we have not yet at this point, although we are hoping to move closer in this direction this year, we have not yet taken on any assets directly from the land bank or any city-owned properties into the trust. That being said, there are numerous currently on the corridor, and we will be reinitiating those conversations this year. And we currently have a new city council representative for our district that is an ally to the KCT, and we are excited to continue those conversations.
Thank you. A question from Jody. One of the limitations on scaling investable opportunities is finding more groups and more communities who are prepared to accept and manage investments. Adriana, your organization is relatively young. Can you comment on how the ecosystem of investable opportunities can be built out, perhaps quickly, but in ways that are also stable and sustainable?
Absolutely. So let's see a couple things. One, KCT is part of a very large ecosystem in Kensington, right? So there are a ton of community development corporations that have been there, 3 that are, fairly well known and named, ASE, Impact Services, and then KCDC, all of which have been taking on investment and deploying capital for decades now. And all of them have had wonderful outcomes. They're highly trusted and regarded by the residents, by community partners, by philanthropy, by private institutions, right? Like they have all the people and a ton of social capital and a ton of impact, like proven impact. And so KCT, we were one of our forming and founding partners was Impact Services. And so through that, we've been able to have really good partnerships with that network and with the work that they are doing on the ground. I think that Kensington specifically, if you're looking at Kensington specifically for investment, is a place that is definitely, it has an abundance of intersection of issues, right? There are a ton of things happening on the ground, many of which are in terms of the built environment within the wheelhouse of the Kensington Corridor Trust, many of which are not built environment associated and are in the wheelhouse of some of our partners who are doing trauma-informed redevelopment and care, like Impact and KCDC and ASE. And so I would say, I think although KCT is, still fairly young and nascent, and I wouldn't say has like full track record, but much to Nia's point earlier, right, we are still building the model. So yes, I already have tenants in place. Yes, we are already generating revenue. Yes, we've already put assets into the pipeline for redevelopment. We're going to break ground this year on a new construction. We've taken on vacant lots and we've built a community garden. I have all of these things. We've transitioned governance, but we're not 10 years out, right? I haven't fully paid off anyone, right? We've begun repayment on some of our earlier debt terms. We've, continued to reevaluate our financial modeling regularly to ensure that we will continue to be on target with our repayment of those debt terms. But it's all, there is still risk inherent in investing in something young. And I think there's still risk inherent in investing in a neighborhood that has a multitude of issues beyond just the built environment that the KCT is trying to tackle.
Thank you. We have a question from David Whitaker. What factors inform your decisions for your different entity structures?
Yeah, I think I'll just, and hopefully this will be a satisfactory answer. I'll try to answer really quickly, which is, I mentioned that at least with Ujima, we had the year, this was in 2014, where we were studying what it would take to start a public bank. And during that year, the group we're interested in again models, initiatives, processes, products that sufficiently centered working class communities and that also sufficiently centered communities of color. So I would say those were the two primary factors. We very explicitly center working class communities of color in Boston, and so we started from who we knew did that in different places with, again, different types of models, products, initiatives, et cetera.
And for us, we looked at all of the things that have been, right? So we took a look at all of the existing structures. We looked at community development corporations, community land trusts, business improvement districts, private traditional development. And we tried to identify what some of the gaps were within each of those in the long-term serving of low-income Black and brown folks in Kensington who had lived there historically, who were being priced out of their neighborhoods, who didn't see pathways to having small businesses on the corridor. And as a result of that, the organization went into this deep legal dive of what are the different ways in which we could structure something that would perpetually protect the real estate so that the folks who live here geographically in this 19134 would always control and govern the assets. It wouldn't be outsiders. It wouldn't be based on your wealth. It wouldn't be based on educational attainment. None of those things. It is you are here, you get to govern. And so after all of that, what felt forever legal research, we landed on this very complex combination of a 501c3 and a perpetual purpose trust. And the 501c3 is what allows us to bring in the subsidy to do this work sustainably. The perpetual purpose trust is what allows us to protect the assets intergenerationally.
Thank you. A question from Tammy Jones. Hey, Tammy in Detroit. Curious about how this work intersects with workforce strategies, and more specifically, how that helps to build BIPOC wealth.
Sure. I think I saw that question earlier in the chat, and that actually made me want to bring up our standards, and I'm just going to drop this in. Dropping in a link to our community standards. These were standards that were derived from community members as well as small business owners. And the connection to me with workforce development is you can actually consider this our investment criteria. So not only are we investing in BIPOC-owned businesses, but we're investing in BIPOC-owned businesses with positive social impact. And so if you look at these standards, you see that there's a section called worker power. We also talk about some of what has come up before. So employee ownership, there's a section called community ownership. There's a section called good local jobs, a section called health and safety, another section called environment, another section called community power. And so for me, the connection to workforce development is essentially ensuring that the businesses that we invest in are creating great jobs. And I do think there's a direct link between great jobs and between wealth, between BIPOC wealth in our communities. And so we don't attempt to kind of take on workforce development directly ourselves. But what we do is uplift the businesses that we do think are providing great jobs, make sure we're investing in them so that they can continue to provide great jobs, they can thrive, they can grow if they want to, and we can see those good benefits proliferate throughout our communities.
And I'll echo that. We also are not directly engaged in workforce, but we do see it. We see the role of KCT as critical important to feeding the local ecosystem. So we do have capital and dollars that are disposable to engage with folks who are in the neighborhood, majority of which are BIPOC and women led. And they're the ones who are really deploying the work, right? We're a staff of 3. So we do not pretend to have marketing expertise. We do not pretend to be architects. We do not pretend to be landscapers. I am not the demo person. And so as many local contractors and consultants and partners that we can engage with on the ground in Kensington, we really feel that that's what's going to help to continue to motivate both from the workforce perspective, but also in terms of building intergenerational wealth for those business owners and hopefully their staff as well.
Thank you so much. We're unfortunately coming to the end of the hour. I would love to first just really thank our esteemed guests, Anna, Nia, and also Gio. And I would love to call up Sharnae Robinson-Williams, ImpactPHL's Director of Community and Content, to share departing words.
Thank you, Ryan. And thank you to all of our panelists, Nia and Adriana. I greatly appreciate you sharing your wealth of knowledge with us. And we have an investable opportunity right here in our backyard. And we have another example of what impact investing truly can do in terms of community economics and empowerment. And so I hope you all enjoyed. Please share in the chat what you are walking away with today. As we close out, I would like to share some information about ImpactPHL. We have a fantastic platform that has just launched called Impact. And this is a perfect opportunity for you as an accredited investor to check out the investable opportunities here in the Philadelphia region. Register today. It's really a great place to find all of the opportunities in one place. And I would like to highlight that KCT is on there. So if you like what you heard today and you are interested in making an impact in the region, please visit Impact and learn more. We have our Total Impact Summit, May 1st and 2nd. Hold the date. Registration will be available to everyone February 1st. So please be on the lookout for that. We have a impactful program that we're putting together for you. And just by a show of hands, please raise your hand virtually if you attended last year. If so, be on the lookout for something special that may be dropping in your inbox very, very soon. And we have an Impact Social coming up February 8th from 5 to 8 at the Navy Yard. Information can be found at impactphl.org/events. I'm sure we are now at time, so I would like to bid you all adieu and say thank you. And we really appreciate you being in community with us.